Hello and welcome to your in-depth weekly horoscope for week commencing the 12th of December. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to give you some standout strands to look out for, which we can all relate to collectively, but please stay with me. I will then dive deep to give you in much greater detail each of the 12 zodiac signs. Now, as this week begins, a truly notable event. Mercury recently moved into the rather business-like sign of Capricorn, enters its shadow period. This is the period before the retrograde begins, which is on the 29th of December. It comes out of that on the 18th of January. But if we are dealing with anything that is more to do with those worldly affairs, it is going to be important to really manage the detail. But despite this, later this week, Mercury does forge a sparkling alliance with Uranus. And it's suggesting this combination that if we can think of new and fresh ways to approach our worldly interactions, even at this late stage of the year, perhaps the shadow period and then the retrograde is asking us to rethink or flex in new ways, which can actually be really valuable to us. Now, also, right at the start of the week, Venus and Jupiter, the two planets of fortune, are just in a square. This runs over from the previous week. It could give us an opportunity to be very generous to someone. Maybe we can get together with people that we have a kinship with, particularly actually through those worldly interactions with Venus in the 10th house. But this is a week when the Sun does square up with Neptune. If you remember, this began on the last day of last week. The Sun in the sign of Sagittarius is very much about discovery, adventure, independence, travel, higher knowledge, philosophies, and even education can be around the rule of law. Neptune, of course, is very much to do with dreams. It's a very mystical influence, and at its best can have quite a magical impact. But I think this particular influence can see us amplify or exaggerate our senses, even if they're not conscious. So if something just puts us in a bit of a spin, there could be a tendency to buy into it a little bit too much. Ironically, Jupiter, the other ruling planet of Pisces, along with Neptune, is in a sensational link with Pluto for the whole of this week. If there is something that you've been working on in a physical way for a long time that has required a great deal of patience, it could be your links with someone that have been developing, perhaps not so much at a tangible level, more an instinctive level. There could be someone that your association with can actually end up being very fortunate indeed. And from Monday through to Thursday, the Sun's in a very constructive link with Saturn. This can offset some of the distortion the Sun's right angle with Neptune can create. And remember, with that Mercury shadow period, managing details is important. So what Saturn is doing with the Sun here is asking us to be a bit more detached, because it's in the sign of Aquarius, which is airy, to think through our ideas for expansion, but research them in a very thorough and step-by-step way. And that can push back some of the dissipating energy of Neptune square to the Sun, which can drain a little bit of vitality from proceedings. Now, on Saturday, there is a quarter moon in the precise sign of Virgo. This is just saying to us, if we do feel that we want to help out or volunteer or assist people in some kind of ways, that's very laudable. We just need to make sure in the following week that we're not promising to do something that actually becomes a bit of a bind to deliver on, perhaps around those festive arrangements. But right at the end of this week, it's the Sun that comes into Jupiter, into a square with Jupiter, replacing Venus. And this is an aspect really that can actually have a very generous side to it. If we can find ways to embrace the more traditional festive strands of looking out for those who are less fortunate, of just small but important gifts, these type of things actually could really have quite an impact on the recipient. But it's also saying to us not to get too caught up in trying to be too much of a people pleaser, I think, around our budget if we are facing some financial realities which are tricky. I think we need to stick with what we feel really comfortable with. But there could be some kind of discussion at the end of this week where you find yourself talking about something where you have a very different worldview from the person that you're discussing this issue with, but actually you can gain or learn something from what could even be a disagreement if you're open to the possibility. Now, we're nearly in 2023. What will the year hold for you as an individual? You can gain a lot from the zodiac forecasting for sure, but it's your personal astrology which is really crucial. If you give me your time, date and place of birth, I can give you your forecast for the coming year. And this will give you searing insights as to when planetary influences are impacting on your natal chart. But also my special package of 30% off. You can get your life roadmap, character analysis report. Please see the link below. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. I'd love you to subscribe. If you're an ongoing follower, thank you so much for joining me once more. Now, here is your in-depth forecast for each sign. So Gemini, your week commencing the 12th of December forecast begins with the Sun in a square with Neptune. This began right at the end of last week. Now the Sun continues its journey in your sector of relating. The 7th house can also be about where we set our boundaries, where we compete. In traditional astrology, it's said to be the engagement we have to have with the people we know are not necessarily on our side. But actually Saturn, in the part of your situation to do with publishing, overseas interests and higher knowledge, is forging a very solid link with the Sun. So if there are relationships that you're very clear about the terms of reference and you can support each other in some kind of collegiate or collaborative way, those kind of ties could make progress. The problem is where you may not be so clear about your personal identity or be worried about how people are viewing you, and that could dissipate your energy through Neptune's square with the Sun. So self-belief is really important, but this can even feed into your personal relationships or family ties on the back of the quarter moon of Saturday, which sees the quarter moon in Virgo in house 5. There could be a little bit of uncertainty there about your interactions with others in relationships. So important to keep the faith. And of course, with Mercury, your ruler, entering its shadow period on Monday, that's in the part of your situation to do with longer term business interests, finance, shared resources. But it is forging a really dazzling angle to Uranus. And although Uranus has been an unsettling influence, I think generally for Gemini people the last few years, this particular manifestation of this particular angle, I feel could see you come up with a brilliant idea from the depths of your mind. It may be one of those proverbial light bulb moments when you just think, wow, yes, I can try this. And this could see you dragging up some inner resources from deep within you that could be very positive for you in terms of your longer term financial situation. Now later this week, the Sun is squaring up with Jupiter. This is because the Sun is reaching the end of its journey in the sign of Sagittarius, and Jupiter is located in Pisces. For you, I feel that this is very important, this aspect, that if you do have any conversations or meetings or interviews or do any presentations, it's vitally important that you present yourself in an accurate way, not because you're trying to in any way necessarily be consciously dishonest, but perhaps trying too hard to make a good impression. And I think that's something to try and avoid doing. Neptune too, because you may feel that your personal identity in a professional context is not very clear, if you're not very solid about who you are, there could be that tendency to try too hard. Remember, with the 7th house, it can be a point of collaboration, but also it can be a point when we try so hard to see the other person's side of the equation that we lose our identity. So that could be a little bit of a challenge this week for you, but there's plenty of other things to be going for, and particularly that Sun sextile with Saturn. I think that really can be very anchoring and very helpful to you indeed.